What is up, guys? Delboy here. So Chris Eubank Jr. wins a very messy, unanimous decision over James Degale. Clear victor in this fight. I felt two of the scorecards were way too close. I felt Eubank Jr., he won this fight with a bit in hand, in my opinion. The fight started out fairly evenly. First round, both guys trying to feel each other out. Both guys were sort of pouring with the jab. James Degale would try and land that southpaw left hand, whereas Eubank Jr., he was jabbing. He was trying to time James Degale coming in with his right hand, and also he was trying to land those wild bombs as well. Round one was fairly even. Round two, Eubank Jr. scores a knockdown. He catches James Degale and follows up on it. James Degale kind of falls back into the corner, and the corner kept him up, so the referee counted it as a knockdown, and rightly so. Eubank Jr. dominated round two. After the second round, like round 3 to round 6, I felt Eubank Jr. was winning the rounds. The rounds were very messy. James Degale was doing a lot of holding, a lot of clinching, a lot of messy work, but I felt Eubank Jr. was the guy who was forcing the pace. He was the guy who was trying to let his hands go, and overall I felt he was doing more work. Degale was landing like a left-hand lead. He was landing his southpaw jab as well, but these shots were few and far between. But rounds sort of 3, 4, 5 were pretty close. Round 6, I felt Eubank Jr., the tide started to turn. He really started to get a foothold in the fight. Again, very messy from both guys, but to me, Eubank Jr. looked like the fitter, stronger guy. Round 7, I felt, was James Degale's last decent-ish round, and after that, it was just all Eubank Jr. And, at times it looked like James Degale was going to get stopped. James Degale was dropped again in round 10. Eubank caught Degale with a lovely left hook in an exchange that badly hurt James Degale. Degale actually somehow manages to stay on his feet, but Eubank jumps all over him and drops him. So that was the second knockdown, and James Degale managed to get out of a round. But round 11 and 12, Eubank Jr. really, he was applying serious pressure. Most of the flush shots that were landing on James Degale were hurting him. He got rocked a few times in the last 2 rounds, and Eubank Jr. was just relentless. James Degale didn't have the strength he had earlier on in the fight to clinch and hold, and Eubank Jr. in rounds 11 and 12 was just bullying him. In fact, in round 11, Eubank, he picked Degale up after Degale tried to hold him, and he literally body slammed him to the floor. And that kind of, it kind of showed how little strength James Degale had left. Eubank Jr., he actually got a point deducted for that, and rightly so, but I can see why he did that, because, let's be honest, Degale was doing a lot of holding. I know Eubank Jr. is a messy fighter. He comes in with his head sometimes, he'll swing wild shots, but, Degale, in my opinion, was initiating most of the clinches in this fight. He didn't want to fight on the inside, and I can understand why Eubank Jr. was getting frustrated. Round 12, more of the same, just Eubank Jr. putting a beating on James Degale, and James Degale clearly lost this fight. Eubank Jr. got awarded the unanimous decision, and rightly so. What did I make of Eubank Jr.'s performance? It was what it was, really. The same old Eubank Jr. for the most part. Aggressive, good tenacity, good strength, good work ethic. Showed a decent chin again. He took a few good flush James Degale left hands and took them really well. It was the same Eubank Jr. for the most part. I did notice a few things different from Eubank Jr. So mainly in the first sort of 2 rounds, or the first 2 or 3 rounds, Eubank Jr., he was trying to counter a little bit more. So you would see him try to time James Degale coming in, because Degale, he likes to throw that lead southpaw left quite a lot, and when he does that, he falls in all the time, and you could see Eubank tried to time that as he was coming in. The shot really wasn't coming off that often, but I liked the fact that Eubank was trying to counter. He actually popped that jab quite a bit in the first few rounds. Not always effective, but it was scoring at times, so I enjoyed that. So yeah, I do think we saw a few things in there that Eubank Jr. was working on in the gym, but like I said, after the first few rounds, I felt Eubank Jr. reverted to type. And one thing I will say, Eubank Jr., he was looking for that chopping right hand as James Degale was coming in. I don't know why he wasn't looking for that uppercut instead. As we know, Eubank Jr. actually has a really good uppercut, and I felt that would have been a good shot for him in this fight if he was opting to counter. But, he never really tried that shot as a counterpunch in this fight, unfortunately. I think that shot could have really paid dividends when James Degale kind of fell short coming in. But, yeah, it was what it was. A few improvements from Eubank Jr., but all in all, pretty much still the same fighter. As for Nate Vasquez, his trainer, he was a steady influence in the corner, seemed pretty calm. His instructions were simple, but, fairly concise. And yeah, I think it will be beneficial to keep him around, to be quite honest. As for Eubank Jr.'s future, where does he go? I mean, he's saying he would fight at either middleweight or super middleweight, and basically he said whoever PBC put in front of him, he will fight. Obviously now the PBC have signed Eubank Jr. to a multi-fight deal, so maybe realistically we could expect a fight like Eubank Jr. versus Caleb Plant. I think that would be a really good fight. Maybe Eubank Jr. versus Anthony Durrell if he beats Avni Yildirim. That's providing David Benavidez doesn't get that shot first. There are a few options out there on the PBC side of things. Maybe Eubank Jr. could fight David Benavidez himself. I actually think that would be a really good fight, and I know people out there will say, oh, Benavidez would destroy Eubank Jr., but reality is, David Benavidez hasn't fought anybody. He's not fought the level of opposition that Chris Eubank Jr. has, so I think it's a little bit unfair to jump to that conclusion. I mean, David Benavidez struggled with Gavril, who's a fringe contender at best, and Benavidez gets all of the hype in the world. I need to see more from David Benavidez. Would Benavidez beat Billy Joe Saunders or George Groves? I'm not sure. So yeah, I mean, Eubank Jr., he is what he is. We know his flaws, we know what he's good at, we know what he's not good at. Ultimately, Eubank, providing he's matched right, he can be involved in some really fun fights, and I believe right now at super middleweight he would give anybody a tough fight. Now he might get comprehensively outpointed by certain guys, but physically, even if you beat Eubank Jr. clearly on points, it's going to be a tough, grueling fight. That's the type of fighter he is. So I think he's competitive with most guys in the super middleweight division. In regards to middleweight, I think the level of competition is a lot higher. I mean, Canelo Alvarez and Golovkin are a level above, and I would pick them to destroy Eubank Jr., to be quite honest. I think Danny Jacobs and Demetrius Andrade would also do a number on Eubank Jr. So, yeah, I think Eubank should leave middleweight alone at the minute. But, yeah, share your thoughts below. What did you make of the performance from Eubank Jr.? And in regards to James Degale, he said if he lost this fight, he would retire. In the post-fight interview, he didn't really give a definitive answer. I want to see him retire. I think he's done. Nothing left to prove. And from here on out, it's only going to get worse. So I would like to see James Degale retire personally. Share your thoughts below. How did you see this fight? Did you enjoy it? Or were you a bit like me and thought, there was a bit too much holding? Share your thoughts below. Peace.